So what you have in the figure of Christ is an actual person who actually lived, plus a myth. And in some sense, Christ is the union of those two things. The problem is I probably believe that. I'm amazed at my own belief, and I don't understand it.
Now we're moving on to Noah's flood. The word translated earth is eretz, E-R-E-T-S, eretz. But it's also translated country 140 times. Country. So you could have, you even say God flooded the whole country. He flooded the whole country. It's also translated 1,476 times land. Cain was driven from the face of the earth. Where did he go? Jupiter? Land. He was driven from the land where he lived, the land of his parents. And then later we read of Abraham. It says, "Get thee out of your country, Eretz, into a land, Eretz, that I will show you." Abraham journeyed thence toward the south country, Eretz. Same word translated earth. You know, it talks about the whole land of Havilah there in the 2nd chapter. Eretz. Not the whole earth of Havilah. No, just the land. And then we have the destruction of different destructions. Isaiah 13:5, they destroyed the whole land. The whole land shall be desolate, Jeremiah 4:27. The word is Eretz. They could have translated earth. The whole earth was desolate. No, it wasn't. Only that part of the land. Jeremiah 21:11 makes it more specific, though. There it says, "And this whole Eretz," or land. This whole earth. No, this whole land. And of course we talked about mountains that can be translated hills. In verse 19 we have the high hills. Then we have the mountains. In another place it just says the hills. "And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the land, and all the hills that were under the heaven were covered, 15 cubits and so on, and the hills were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the land, both the fowl and the cattle and the beasts. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground." Now notice now there they didn't even King James didn't use the whole face of the earth, but upon the ground, both men and cattle and creeping things. And they were destroyed from, now they put earth again, same word, and were destroyed from the land. And Noah remained alive. And the waters prevailed upon the land 150 days. And all you have to do is be consistent with the word. It's the land. Wherever this flood was, that whole land, when it was flooded, that's what's in question here. So if you read through that, then there's not that big of a problem. But there's all kinds of problems. I'll just point out some of them. Did you notice it says, this is after the water receded, "And sent forth a dove out of the ark, and the dove came unto him in the evening, and lo, in its mouth was an olive leaf plucked off." Well, my Bible has a little 1 there, superior 1, and then in the margin it says, "freshly plucked." Rotherham's Bible says, "newly sprouted." Newly sprouted. Freshly plucked, newly sprouted. Not after 1 year of salt water covering it to a depth of 6 miles. No. Nobody ever saw that before, did you? Now, it says that the ark came to rest on Ararat. It's at the top of the mountains. The hills is the same thing as the hills, or it can mean the hill country. But young earthers say, "Yeah, the land of Ararat," and they're up there. What now in Turkey they call Mount Ararat, and it says the mountains or the hills of Ararat. Isn't like one mountain, but now we got one Mount Ararat, and they're up there looking for the ark. And there's one Ufgay, he claims he found it, and of course he didn't. He lies. But that mountain is 17,000 feet tall. Now, think for a moment. The ark lands at the top of Mount Ararat, 17,000 feet up in the sky. And then it slowly starts to dissipate. And Noah sends out a dove. And it comes back with an olive branch, growing 17,000 feet high in the sky. Olives don't grow 17,000 feet on the top of mountains. See, the Bible knows what it's talking about. Younger Christians and theologians don't know what they're talking about. Here's another thing I caught just the other day. I really didn't spend that much time reading Genesis. I know pretty much what it said. I didn't like dissect this like I did the first chapter. Notice it says, at the end of the flood, God says, I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood. Neither shall there be any more a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the token and covenant that I will give it unto you, and so on. He give them that rainbow covenant. There's something interesting in there. And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters. Neither shall there be any more a flood. To what? What? Destroy the earth? Did you ever see that before? This flood destroyed the earth. That means to decay, ruin, corrupt, cast down, batter, perish, waste utterly. That's what Dr. Strong says that word means. Are we being told here that Noah's flood was a global flood and the entire planet was totally destroyed, decayed, ruined, corrupted, cast down, battered, perished, and wasted utterly, the entire earth planet? I don't think so. But where this flood was, it destroyed the earth. Not only did it destroy the animals, it destroyed the earth at that spot. Now, who knows how long till it came back. These are major points. They're in your Bible. It's just that you've got to pay attention to all the words. You've got to pay attention to all the words. The word earth is used locally all through the Bible. Exodus 9:33, Jeremiah 33:1. All the kingdoms of the earth and his dominion and so on fought against Jerusalem. Oh, really? All the kingdoms of the earth? The Chinese came down and the Japanese came over and the Indians and the Aborigines and American Indians. They were all over in the fight against Jerusalem, were they? No. And all the kingdoms of the land. That land. So if that land, if it's only the kingdoms of that land that came up against Jerusalem, then you have no reason to say that this water covered the whole earth. It's the land. What land? The land where all these corrupt people were doing all these corrupt things. And it doesn't say that there weren't any bad people anywhere else in the world. This was just a spot of utter corruptness. Listen, when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, why? They were corrupt. Were there not other corrupt people? Yeah, why didn't he burn them all with fire? Because there'd be nobody left. He destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah and all the cities of the plain. That's all, just that area. Now when you get 100 miles further on all sides, you find more corrupt people. But he didn't destroy them all, just those in that land. 2 Chronicles 36:23, Cyrus' empire is said to have encompassed all the kingdoms of the earth. But we know how far it went. All the kingdoms of the land, that land. In Acts 11:28, it speaks about a famine throughout all the world. Throughout all the land. Luke 2:21, decree went out to tax the whole world. We weren't taxing the Chinese or the French. The whole land was taxed. Another good point is, if the earth was flooded globally, then the water dissipated. Where did it go? Where did it go? You can't empty a swimming pool. By taking a bucket out of one end and pouring it in the other. You can. You dip buckets all day long. You'll never get that thing in a million years. You'll never get that pool empty. The fact that the earth would have been completely flooded by a mile or 2 miles or 6 miles of water, the fact that it's totally flooded shows one thing. Why was it flooded? There was no place for the water to go but up. How are you going to get it to come down when it's all up? And so we'll push it down. It'll go up over here. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of such points, I'm convinced, concerning the geologic table, the age of the earth, Noah's flood. There is no end to the insurmountable problems. But if you just have a flood in the land, all problems are solved. All problems are solved. Did I mention about the pressure? We talked about sea pressure, didn't we? You know, if you pile the water up 6 miles high, instead of being 15 pounds per square inch, it would be 800 tons. So the idea that, well, fish could at least survive in Noah's... No, they couldn't.
Pyramids couldn't either.
Pyramids wouldn't make it either. Nor Stonehenge. If you add up all the different species, you get so many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe of animals, and they won't fit on the ark. They just will not fit. Absolutely not. But if you just take the species from the area that was flooded, you can easily put a lot of animals on the ark from one area. Caring for the animals would be a massive undertaking. They have calculated how much food, for example, a horse or a cow or any of these consume in a year, and it's mind-boggling. They would need thousands. They would need 1,000 tons of food. There just wasn't room on the ark. And not only would you need thousands of tons of food, what are you going to do with all the waste? You got 8 people to take care of 20, 30,000 animals and all of their poop, and I mean, it's just, but if you just take a big valley area, what's going to be flooded, where all these bad people had their city or wherever it was that God said, I'm going to wipe them all out, then it certainly is conceivable and feasible. Could animals have traveled from elsewhere? Some, like sleuths and penguins, can't travel over land very well. Some, like koalas and insects, require special diets. Some cave-dwelling arthropods can't survive in less than 100% relative humidity. Some, like dodos, must live on islands. Could the animals have all lived near Noah? Some creationists suggest the animals traveled to reach the ark. A moderate climate could have made it possible for them to live a long time. However, this proposal makes matters even worse. The point above would have applied not only to island species, but to almost all species. This is the reason why. Gila monsters, yaks, and huttals, I don't know what that is, don't live together in a temperate climate. Most extinctions are caused by destroying the organisms' preferred environments. That's how they die. You take them out of their environment. Now we're going to take all the animals of the world out of their environment to preserve them. No, you'll kill them. You'll kill them. They can't live like that. How was the ark loaded? Noah had only 7 days to load the ark. If they only had 15,764 animals on the ark, one animal would have had to be loaded every 38 seconds. What is a kind? The creationists themselves can't decide on an answer to this. They propose a criteria ranging from species to order. And I haven't seen an entire kingdom, like bacteria, suggested as a single kind. Woodmore compromises by using genus as a kind. However, on the ark, kind must have meant something closer to a species. Why? Why were they taken on the ark? To preserve them alive. So if they were taken on the ark to preserve them alive, they had to be able to breed. And many animals that seem somewhat related are not of the same species. They can't breed. And if they can't breed, you can't preserve them alive. There's just hundreds of points. Bristle-cone pines and the creosote bushes, they get to be 11,000 years old. And their tree rings, they're basically annual. Some young earthers say, well, sometimes 2 rings form in a year. This is not the norm, Depends if there's an early winter or something, I guess, could screw it up just slightly. But basically the tree rings will tell you whether or not it was above average wet year or a dry year, or if there's like 7 years of drought, you'll find 7 rings very tightly spaced together. So I can tell a lot from dendrochronology. But the thing is, if the trees survived the flood, and they're much older, the bristle-cone pines go back 5,000 years. The flood goes back 4,300 years. So you have 700 years. When that tree was 700 years old, if there was a 1-year flood then, that particular ring or 2 should show some significant difference, you see? There's no difference. Why is there no evidence of the flood in the ice cores? Okay, we talked a little bit about ice cores. Ice cores show the annual summer-winter snowfalls, and it gets compacted down. 20 feet gets compacted down to 3 inches, 2 inches. When you get down a couple thousand feet, the years are compacted down very tightly, to tremendous pressure. They can actually take out of the core, take air out, and they can tell you the temperature at that time. They can tell you the gases that were in the atmosphere and everything from an ice core going back 50,000 years. It's amazing what they can do. But 4,300 years ago on the ice cores, there's nothing significant. Nothing significant. Doesn't indicate there was an entire year of flood where there was no snow deposits or whatever. One of the biggest problems in the Grand Canyon is the second layer down, this huge, I don't know what it is, 600 feet thick, what's called the Coconino Sandstone Formation. And the reason that's a problem is it's a desert. It's a desert. So we have hundreds of feet of wind-blown desert sand sandwiched between all those lower levels below that in the canyon, plus another 1,000 or 2 layers that would erode it away from the top. In the middle of Noah's flood, we have a desert. And then it's no, those aren't wind blown. That's water. Those are water dunes, not sand dunes. I mean, not wind blown. There's a difference. And scientists can tell the difference whether ripple marks in the sand were made by water or whether they were made by wind. Also, the size of the kernels, whether the kernels of sand have been blown in the wind over millions of years against each other, whether they're rounded as opposed to sharper, and they have ways. Of course, they have to lie about it and come up with something. What are you going to do with a desert in the middle of Noah's flood? Here's one that I thought about one day. I'm thinking, wait a minute. Arches Monument, Arches National Park. Can you see that at all? How precarious that rock is sitting on top there? And here's an arch, very, very thin. I have an article by some young earther. He says, here's proof of Noah's flood. Look how it washed the mud out from underneath there and left an arch. Are you crazy? You have a pile of mud, and you've got torrents of billions of gallons of water flowing back off as the water receded, and it's going to wash all the mud out from underneath this mud arch on top, and it's going to stay there for the next 3,000, 4,000 years. unbelievable. There is proof positive that that arch was carved out by wind, not water. Very slowly. Wind got a hole through there, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. Even now, after that rock has gotten hard as rock, for thousands of years, if you ran water through there and slished it against that thing at any speed, it'd knock it right down. How stupid can you get? We think when it was still soft and muddy, it stayed standing. By the way, that top arch fell down 2 months ago. After millions of years, it fell down back in June. First a big chunk fell out of it, and then the whole thing came down. But anyway, it's just an amazing thing. See that arch up on the hill there? I mean, you think that was carved out by Noah's flood? Give me that break.